Welcome everyone to the Seattle Southside Chamber's Burien District Committee Roundtable. Today we're focused on crime mitigation strategies. This committee will continue to convene at least quarterly, so please stay connected to the Chamber for information on future committee meetings and how you can be involved and support our work to ensure we're able to continue connecting and convening to support our community. We're grateful that Fire Chief Mike Mars is here tonight with us, as well as Chief Ted Beau with the Iberian Police Department, and Aaron Burkhalter from LEAD. We are also so very grateful that several dignitaries from the city are taking time out of their night here to be here tonight. After the presentations, we should have plenty of room for Q&A at the end. This is a copyrighted webinar, so that is presented by the Seattle Southside Chamber of Commerce and may not be reproduced or retransmitted in any form without the express written consent of the Chamber. This is a Zoom meeting, and I think by now we're all used to Zoom, but a few housekeeping items are: everyone is deserving of respect. That means we all need to treat each other with kindness and respect. Please don't talk over each other and do anything that would prevent others from hearing whoever is speaking. Please note that if anyone is disrespectful, at my discretion, I will give one warning before you are removed from the meeting. Thank you for respecting our guidelines and ensuring that our meeting is successful and productive. And although we don't have time to introduce all of ourselves in person, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Your name, your business, and location, whether that's Burien, White Center, or elsewhere, we really appreciate it. And for asking any questions, you have several options. You can use the raise your hand feature, and I will do my best to call on you, and you can ask your question in person. If you do not want to raise your hand to speak, you can type your question or comment into the chat, and I'll do my best to facilitate those. If you'd like to, or it would help you, please turn on closed captions. Just click the CC button at the bottom of the screen and select show subtitles. The agenda for this evening is pretty simple. We'll first hear from Burien Police Chief Ted Beau on crime trends and updates. We'll then transition to an update from LEAD and end with the Fire Chief Mike Mars and a Q&A session. The Chamber is grateful to be able to host this opportunity for our community to connect, to learn, and to engage. The issues facing our community are not unique to us. As an independent nonprofit dedicated to equitable economic development and community engagement, serving our community for generations, we have always believed very strongly in the power to come together to find solutions to all complex problems our community faces. We were founded on the belief that we are stronger together, and to hear and see these concerns from our community, we stand in solidarity with you, our members, and our businesses of our community. And we want to focus on finding solutions together. Public safety is economic development, and it's paramount that we collaborate as a community to do all that we can do to keep our community safe, thriving, and growing. Thank you so much for being here today. This presentation is being recorded by our media partner, South King Media. And if you are uncomfortable with being recorded, please feel free to leave at this time. And with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Burien Police Chief Ted Beau. Take it away, Chief Beau.
Thank you guys for a few minutes time tonight. I appreciate the turnout. I'm going to talk a little bit about some crime trends, and then also the theme of tonight's meeting is safety, security, and de-escalation. So I will give some tips on those related topics. And most importantly, I want to have a few minutes to listen to people's ideas, concerns, and whatever we can do to kind of work together on some of this. So without further ado, can I make the slide work? There we go. All right. Couple things first, my philosophy on law enforcement. I believe that law enforcement is a balance of 3 different areas. And in order to be effective, we have to be good at all 3 of them. The first one is building trust, and it's how we relate to our customers, to our community, and build credibility in our work. And it's who we work with. That we really look at every event is either something that adds to or distracts from the trust in your law enforcement partners. I believe we have to fight crime. I think we have to actually influence crime rates in our community, and I think we do that collectively. I think that it is a sucker's bet for police to believe that they will deal with all crime and all issues and everything in a community by themselves if the community and all the other people that have a role in fighting crime aren't engaged. And you're gonna hear two of them tonight. Your fire department, our LEAD program, they're all part of this collective team that brings safety to our community. So I do believe that we are just a piece in that bigger picture. And the third thing is I think we have to support our officers. I think we have to give them training. I think we have to give them resources. I think we have to support them. And I think that in making healthy officers serve your community, you will get a better outcome from the officers serving your community on both of the other two, fighting crime and building trust. So a little bit about where we're at stats wise. One of the measures we use is what's the workload? How many calls are we running on? How many times are people calling 911? And what this is a comparison of the last 4 years. And I don't know how easy it is to see on your screens. Those on phones, this might be a little small, but I'll share the presentation through the chamber afterwards, and the data is clearly not confidential. But what we see is our call load is basically been steady over the last 4 years. So not much of an increase, not much of a decrease, functionally steady. And there are some anomalies within that come with COVID, but generally speaking, we run approximately 20,000 calls a year with the Burien Police Department. And that looks to be a trend that will hold true again this year. I pulled a whole bunch of different stats just to see what's increasing, what's decreasing, what are the type of calls we're experiencing. And then I compared them year to date to the exact day last year. So you can see in a snapshot, what we're seeing is some offenses are going up and some are going down. We're seeing, for instance, assaults have gone up in the last year. And violations of protection orders have gone up in the last year. And a lot of that is tied to increasing domestic violence crime. And we're seeing a pretty demonstrative trend in the domestic violence crime increases. We're also seeing auto thefts and robberies up dramatically. Counter to that, we're seeing burglaries, frauds, and auto thefts down fairly dramatically over the same period of time last year. So another one in here that a lot of people notice is drug offenses are way down. That doesn't mean that there's not drugs in our community. What that means is that we've had a fairly severe shift in the law as it relates to drugs and police response to drugs in our community. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit in a minute, but really what it means is you're seeing less criminal referrals or prosecution referrals or drug-related responses from law enforcement. So people always say, oh, you aren't doing anything. Nobody does anything about crime. Well, so far this year, we've made just under 700 arrests, and they're outlined. Like I said, one of the categories we saw increase a lot on there was assaults. If you look at this, you'll see the thing that we made more arrests for than anything else was assaults. So police are responding to the respective crime trends and responding with both a criminal justice approach, but also who else needs to be at the table and who else needs to be helping us in our response to these trends that we're seeing in our community. I want to talk a little bit about prevention. How do we deal with crime? And this is kind of where it becomes more about like, what can you do? One of these factors is the offender, the person who's committing the crime. They're part of what they call this triangle when you look at crime, where you need an offender, you need a place to commit a crime, and you need a victim or a target of that criminal behavior. Oftentimes you have very little say over whether or not the offender is present, whether or not they're incarcerated, whether or not they're going to be in the community. One of the things the two things that you do tend to control is the place, which is your space, and whether or not you're an attractive target or victim for crime. So some of the themes that come up over and over again in crime prevention, the first one is pay attention. A couple years ago, we had a big trend of people getting their cell phones taken at bus stops, and it was always the same phenomenon that they were playing Angry Birds on their phone, and somebody walked up and grabbed their phone out of their hand and ran away. That crime occurs 100% of the time when you're not paying attention. And anybody who's paying attention, there was never a robbery or a physical assault. They just grabbed it out of your hand and ran because you weren't paying attention, you didn't see it coming. So one of the things we often teach people is the first thing from a business, from a community member, is just take your phone, put it in your pocket, walk, pay attention to the world around you. One of the things police officers do a lot is when they sit in a restaurant, they always sit where they can see the door. it's a comfort thing that I can see what's coming in. I can see what's in front of me. So oftentimes, just that act of paying attention. In the retail spectrum, there's really good research out there that says the simple act of saying hi to somebody when they walk into your establishment reduces their willingness to commit a crime in your establishment dramatically. So one of the first things that we want to do, both from the personal side as well as from the business side, is just make sure we're paying attention. Say hi to people, smile, acknowledge their existence. That impacts whether or not you're an attractive target or victim. I say keep it clean. Broken windows theory says disorder leads to disorder. So if your business has vandalism and you don't get it cleaned off, you will get more vandalism. The same business, if you wash it off, is less likely to get more vandalism. And this is that broken windows theory, that when people see that a crime's okay and that there's no response, they're more likely to do more of that crime. So when I say keep it clean, keep your space clean, keep it neat, keep it organized. If somebody throws garbage on the ground, pick it up and throw it away. The next person's more likely to use the garbage can and not throw garbage on the ground. Light it up. One of the things we know in criminal behaviors is criminals like to be in the shadows. They like to not get seen. They like to not be caught. And one of the best ways to do that is just add a bunch of light. They don't like being in well-lit areas. They don't like in areas with clean lines of sight where they're going to get caught. People are going to see them. They're going to call the police. They're going to say, hey, what are you doing? They don't like that kind of engagement. So they like to be in the shadows and they like to be where they can't be seen. Lock it up, I think, is self-explanatory, but generally speaking, you want to make things more difficult. A lot of crimes are crimes of ease. When we start talking about being a target, crimes of ease sometimes are where you just don't lock it up. A great example of this happens every cold morning, that first really cold morning, and people just can't stand the idea of going out and getting in a cold car. So they go out, they start their car, and then they go back in and get their cup of coffee. By leaving an unlocked running car in your driveway, police will take nothing but stolen car reports all morning long on that first cold morning, because what we've done is left an unlocked, attractive thing there. We've created an environment for which if somebody's walking by and willing to do a crime, we've created that environment. They wouldn't have stole a car if you didn't create the environment and it wasn't easy, unlocked, and running. So part of this is just things we can do just to make ourselves a harder target, just to make sure that somebody looks at you and says, I'm going to go down to the next car down the road. I'm going to go down the block. I'm going to go to the next community because this community is not a great place. And then I always say call 911 for suspicious behaviors. Even if somebody isn't necessarily committing a crime, seeing a police officer drive by or having a police officer roll down the window and say, hey, how you doing this morning? It lets them know that somebody was concerned enough to call, that we were paying attention and that the officers are being responsive to that. So don't be afraid to call 911 and report suspicious behaviors so that people see that their police department's engaged. As we talked about, there's 20,000 calls for service a year in Burien. Your calls help dictate where we patrol and where we're going to be. So a little bit about de-escalation. That's an office and pitching for the office. So I had to throw that on there. So the first thing that we talk about is your safety, right? Time, distance, shielding. So time means give yourself space, give yourself that ability to slow things down, to think for a minute. And one of the best ways to do that is just to move back a little bit so somebody is further away from you, and to create shielding. So put a desk between you and them. If you're in a restaurant, stand on the other side of a table. Give you something that's a physical barrier between you and the person who's agitated that you're dealing with. Remain calm. One of the things we find is a lot of people, all of a sudden you raise your voice and they raise their voice, and all of a sudden two people are yelling at each other and nobody's communicating. Because once everybody gets excited, there's no communication occurring. And one of the things that we found in law enforcement is most effective is actually just to keep lowering your voice. People have a natural desire to want to hear you speak. And as you lower your voice, they actually will lower their voice, which brings all of the anxiety down just a little bit. I say actively listen. Oftentimes in a business environment, somebody's legitimately frustrated about some sort of a transaction. And if we can listen to what actually is causing that anxiety or that anger, we might be able to find a resolution to the anger they're experiencing in the moment. And make sure you tell them what you're hearing. What I heard you say is you're upset about this thing. What I heard you say is you weren't satisfied because your food wasn't hot. Can I get you another meal? Or would you like to have a rebate? Would you like to have a gift card? Now we can solve whatever they're telling you is their problem. And it helps to narrow it down and also remove the miscommunication, which actually increases the anxiety. So if what you heard and what they said are not the same, we can clarify that point of confusion instead of having things escalate into a misunderstanding. Last thing with boundaries. Boundaries need to be clear, particularly safety boundaries. Sir, I need you to stay here. I need you to stand back a little bit. I need you to not touch me. Give very clear commands, direction when it comes to your boundaries. This is a line that can't be crossed. We can talk, but you can't touch me. That is a perfectly acceptable boundary to set with somebody, and there's nothing wrong with setting that boundary very clearly. Last thing, if you feel uncomfortable, you feel your safety's in danger, call 911. Get us started, get us reacting, have somebody else call 911 is also an acceptable option. I always tell people this, remember property versus people. If you don't feel safe and you have the ability to walk away and call 911. Get yourself that distance and give us an opportunity to get there and resolve the problem. And last thing, a little bit about some of the things your police department's working on. I say call 911, and that is important. I look a lot at crime stats. I look at where are people calling for police response and what are they calling about? Because that lets me focus a response that is actually addressing the issues you're dealing with and know who to engage. There's a big difference between assaults going up because of domestic violence and auto thefts going up. That's important things for me to know, because my response as your police chief and your police department and who needs to come to the table to help mitigate that is different depending on the type of crime. So it is important to me that people are calling and giving us good information through statistics. We do hotspot patrols. You'll see on here on the 14th. So just last week, we did an emphasis with Safeway, Rite Aid, and the Burien Plaza Center. And the emphasis was to have a lot of officers who are working on the issues that they were experiencing, both from the business front, but also from people's perception of safety in the property. So by working with the property manager and the businesses, we can do really focused hotspot policing to address an issue. And I will admit, I said earlier, it's a team sport. I don't do this on my own. If we're doing this, we can count that lead's going to be getting calls that night, because we're going to be looking, if it's a drug issue that's in the back, we're going to be making referrals to them because they might be the better tool to deal with this for the community in the long run. And we're going to talk about that a little bit here at the end when Aaron gets a chance to talk to y'all. We did add a storefront this year, and by all accounts, people are giving great feedback just to having Officer Hayden walking around downtown, being visible. His car is parked down there. He gives you a point of contact. We have a team called the Iberian Crime Reduction Unit, who are officers really focused on some of these ongoing crime issues we're dealing with in downtown, as well as across the community. And one of the things they work on is what's called a Blake referral. So I'm gonna look on time. I don't want to take too much time, but one of the things that happened was the Supreme Court in a decision called Blake said that the Washington state drug law was unconstitutional and threw it out. We have no law that makes possession of drugs of any sort in the state of Washington illegal. And to fill that gap, the legislature created a new law that said, when we are engaging somebody who is in possession of drugs, we can talk to them and detain them only long enough to make a referral on the first 2 times we engage them. So twice, we have to give them a legitimate opportunity to resolve the problem through engagement with an organization like LEAD. So the first 2 times we have to make these referrals. And just in the last week, I just want to talk about this, we had 10 different referrals. So 10 people in the city were found to be utilizing drugs in a public location. They were detained by police, their drugs were confiscated, and they were referred to an organization such as LEAD. So we are still responding to it, but our response looks different. We don't take that person to jail. That's not an option until we can document that they've had multiple referrals to an organization to give them a legitimate and fair opportunity to resolve the issue of their addiction. And finally, I am a firm believer in the harm reduction model. So I am a believer in making the situation better. That means sometimes the best solution isn't an instant solution. If somebody is under the influence of drugs and I can deal with the symptom that's causing you an issue in your community, that might be more effective than trying to get that person immediately off the drugs or immediately into jail, because that might not be the best tool. So I'm going to look at what is the problem that's causing you your issue and see if we can massage that out to get a solution that solves your interests as a business or a community member. I do want to talk a little bit about this concept of leading with services. One of the things we do as a police department is really look at this idea of who's at the table, who's a partner in this game. And this just gives you a list of the different organizations that Burien Police Department, Burien Human Services have either partnered with or contracted with because they're part of this bigger discussion around how do we help our community with a service-oriented approach, which functionally shows a longer term benefit to your community than exclusively a criminal justice approach. I never take anything off the table. It's not an either or, it's an and. We all work together to try to find the best solution. And sometimes that's a police solution, sometimes it's a community solution. And with that, I think we have a little bit of time here for questions, and I'm here as late as you need me. So certainly if I run out of time, I can jump back on at the end as well. But I'd love to open it up to any questions y'all have.
I see Jasmine Williams has her hand up.
Hi, sorry I'm off screen. My little one is a 3-year-old and kind of doing their toddler thing in the background, so off screen. But I'm Jasmine Williams. I'm the owner of Blackberry, located in downtown Burien. I really recognize everything that you say in terms of how to set up our businesses, having our lights on, things to do. I do all of that, but because of the placement of my business is actually in a basement of a building, it really presents as a great cubby hole for addicts to go, and they are doing drugs. I'm catching them every other day going down there. They will come during the day, they will come at night. I have an alarm system on there, a video camera, and I've recently talked to Officer Hayden because I just felt like by the time I'm able to call and y'all are able to arrive to the location, they have left. And so it's really had me looking at what can I do to make my space safer, especially that I have a doula center. So I have lots of families and single parents and parents with very young ones coming around there. And our corner definitely seems to be kind of a block party site for folks that are dealing with homelessness and also drug use and alcohol. And so just trying to figure out in what capacity can I be of help to do things. I know I live in Seattle myself, but I find that so many families are being moved out of Seattle into South King County and especially Burien and other cities that it was just best to have my business there to be accessible as a resource for folks. But it's definitely a hindrance to my work when I can't get to my office or I have to tell folks not to come yet because I have somebody using right in front of my door. So just trying to find kind of some possible solutions in the meantime to help lower the number of folks that come to my front door.
First of all, welcome to Burien. We're glad you're here. Second of all, I'm glad to hear that you've already had a talk with Officer Hayden. I know he was going to come down and talk to you a little bit about some possibilities with that space. And I know we also have talked to some of our outreach providers about what can we do with some of the concerns that came up through conversations with you as well as an email I believe you sent in. The idea certainly is a CPTED one, crime prevention through environmental design. You mentioned that there's a lot of physical barriers that create line of sight view issues, et cetera. So then we have to look at, is there things we can do that are reasonable to either keep your space more secured so people can't get into those cubbies, or how do we make those cubbies less attractive? And that's something that I just need to think through, and I don't know your space well enough, but I do have somebody who's been trained in doing design work in CPTED, and certainly would offer up that they go take a look and see if there's structural ways that we can reduce the likelihood of people using that space. You bring up another valid point that, as we see greater push in our community to address addiction, if there's not the right tools available, all we do is displace, which is a valid point that you brought up, that a lot of people in Seattle, if you push really hard on a group in Seattle, what you really do is just have people relocate to another area because you haven't solved the problem. They still have the addiction that's unmet. So we have to really look at long-term solutions to behavioral health in our community, which are much bigger picture discussions than we're going to solve in this meeting, but they are things that we're actively talking about. A couple of our council members I see have logged on. And, we talk about this in our strategic planning is what are these regional approaches and what are the things we can do to leverage our position in the community to get more resources out of the county and out of the state, because this stuff's expensive and it's outside the scope of Burien's budget in a lot of cases to solve these issues. So that's a big, long story to say. I will certainly make sure that we come back around and get a CPTED analysis and see if we can come up with some ideas for your property.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And I had kind of just two more, if that's okay, if I can
Sure.
add. I was also wondering, just in terms of the resources that Burien offers to folks dealing with homelessness and addiction, if there are any physical handouts, so I can have them at my center. So if folks do come while I'm there, I can hand them something, so it's not just me telling them they need to move and knowing that they're going to come back because there's no other options, but me being able to give them something so then they can know what's the closest center they can go to, who they can reach out to within the city of Burien, just so I have that on hand as well, because they do come even while I'm there. So that's one question, and I'll ask the other one after.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna get a presentation that's gonna hit that point here at the end with Lead is gonna talk a little bit about the resources in our community. And then we also are just onboarding a neighborhood care coordinator, which is an outreach specialist that'll be working just in downtown Burien, 40 hours a week. So we'll have somebody who's doing that exact work in downtown Burien and trying to figure out ways to help your business, but also resource allocation, which Aaron will provide you some information on that during his presentation about what's the best way to make a referral into Lead and to get Evergreen Treatment Services out there to help.
Okay. And my last question, which probably might be a bigger one or more of like a city council question, but knowing that the number of folks that are being displaced from Seattle to South King County, and as you stated too, they're not solving the problem, they're just moving them. Have there been conversations with the city of Seattle about providing funding to cities like Burien and other cities that are now taking on Seattle's displaced residents so that there can be more funding in the budget to help with the resources?
Yeah, and I don't know if everybody has presentation rights, but you have a lot of people in this conversation. We're part of several organizations trying to increase the voice of South King County, and that's both at the council level, and I believe I saw Colleen Branch Litter log on as well, which are human services coordinator here, or manager here in the city. And really the focal point there is trying to get resources brought into South King County so that we also get a share of the resources that we need collectively. So we are absolutely part of that discussion. I know our council members are actively part of that discussion of how do we draw some of those regional solutions in? Because really it's not, most of these issues are not Burien-centric problem or issue. They're rather big collective issues that need a big collective response. And that's what we're seeing now is, even some of the big things like housing. Housing is a monstrous expense that needs to be taken on by the county and the state to get adequate housing in our community. And what does that look like? It's outside the scope of a municipal budget, but much more reasonable when you start looking at Seattle, King County, and state budgets.
Okay, thank you.
And I see Hugo has his hand up.
Thanks. Thanks, Chief, and thanks, Jasmine, for making time. I appreciate you making this discussion. I just want to echo Chief Beau's comments about us actively trying to reach out to our surroundings partners. Generally, the focus has been really within the county because that's really their structure of supporting all the cities within King County. But also in partnership with trying to reach out to some of the programs, and LEAD is one of those programs. This started in the city of Seattle, and Burien is the first city outside of Seattle to have a LEAD expansion program here. And we plan to continue to do that work to find financial resources, program resources with the county, and even with the state and federal as well. Recently, I'll forward you a recap of our meeting yesterday at the council. There was some exciting programs touching on everything that was just brought up. So I'll definitely circle back with you to go over some of those options. But thank you for that, for taking your time, Jasmine. I really appreciate it. And then also thanks for the work you're doing yourself, trying to make sure that baby formula is accessible to Black families. I think I saw something that you did recently in the news about that. So thank you for that work.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Great dialogue. So to move the program forward, I want to introduce our next speaker, Aaron Burkhalter from LEAD.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron Burkhalter. I am the project manager for the LEAD program in Burien and White Center, two joined programs, but separately staffed and focused for our South County area. We also have programs running around Seattle that we manage locally, and there's a lot of expansion work that's happening now with the additional need for diversion services following certain state legislation that I'll get to in a little bit. But we also have programs that we've helped supervise and have helped stand up across the US and even places overseas. I wanted to say to Jasmine first, thank you for your questions. And in terms of getting physical resources that you can hand out, I'd love to follow up with you, not only with that, but also what you're seeing there, because the thing that goes through my head is like, oh, is it one of our clients who needs a check-in and a reminder about the spaces they're staying and the impact that they're having. And so that's something I'd love to follow up with you in tomorrow about. But in terms of our program, I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that we've been in Burien for 3 years. Program started, just months before I came on to the scene with the lead program. And then it's been about 1 year that we've been operating in White Center. I know I'm the project manager, and this will sound a little braggy, but it really is about the entire team in Burien. This has been the steadiest, most creative, most collaborative lead program I've encountered. And it's something that comes up a lot. We'll be in Seattle talking about, oh, well, we've got this new challenge that's facing Seattle. And then someone will go, well, except for Burien. So that's just a big thank you to Chief Beau and his team, to the REACH team that does our service providers, and to our community, Colleen Brandt Schluter, our folks on the city council who've taken the time to work with us. So just celebrating 3 years over here. What that looks like right now is in Burien, we have 80 active clients. So these are people that have been referred into the program. They've connected with the screening and outreach coordinator, and they've done a full intake that includes a release of information form, which allows our folks to be able to call their other providers and be able to help set appointments, get information, help do the full kind of encompassing work that it takes to look at a person's life, needs, and services and help them navigate those. Of course, we've had many more referrals. Some of those people people have come and gone. Some people we're still working and hoping to get connected to the program. And we have almost 30 in White Center right now. One of the things I just kind of wanted to highlight of where we're going next with this is there's been a lot of questions. Chief Beau and I just earlier this week had a conversation about, like, who aren't we getting? Who out there is having an impact on the community, is struggling, is in need of services, and how do we meet those? So that has included on our end looking at what's happening in the courts, who's showing up at our municipal court system. Are there people at the transit center that we need to be checking in with? Certainly. And are there things that our BPD patrol is seeing that we might be able to tap into, places that we can do that? With that in mind, I think the largest area of growth that we have has to do with the Blake decision, which I don't know how much you all have spent time with that, but anyone with the lead program in Burien can tell you how many meetings and conversations we've had to sort this out. And this is basically the decision, court decision that was followed by legislation that basically states that officers can no longer arrest and charge someone for a drug possession. They have to give 2 referrals instead to services, to some kind of social service to get them the support that they need. After those 2 referrals, supposedly, according to the legislation, you could make an arrest and a charge. I think we haven't really in Burien seen what that looks like yet, but we do have a police force that's been asking lead, certainly, a lot of folks, what do we do with this person? What do we do with this person? How do we get tapped into services? So what we've been doing is trying to make sure that there's a really clear and streamlined process through which a patrol officer at 3 a.m. can pick up a phone, make a phone call, and get some support for an individual. that can come in one of two ways. This is what we call the green light phone. It is a officer dedicated phone for lead services. And they call directly to an on-call case manager or outreach coordinator to connect with and talk with them. And so they will kind of on the phone talk, and they can determine whether this is a get some contact information. I'm going to follow up with this person later. Or if this is I've got my keys, I'm headed out the door, I'm coming to you right now. And we need to meet in person. This is a line that officers can use not only for new referrals, but for people that they've encountered again and again and again. They can use it to say, hey, Aaron is back out at the plaza again, and he's doing what he does over there. And I really, I thought he had a case manager. What's going on over there? And then if, they can say, great, I'm going to find their case manager and I'm going to get them down there and we're going to have a conversation and see what's going on. This is kind of our biggest body of work right now beyond our existing 80 active clients that we have. Twice each month, we have a big meeting with police, prosecutors, case managers, outreach workers, myself, Colleen Branch-Luter from the city, just a handful of different people from different sectors of the work that we do today. And all we looked at today were referrals that were brought in through those phone calls from an officer on the field saying, I've got a person who's using fentanyl and they've got a criminal history and we need to have that addressed. I will say, I think this work is progressing really amazingly because we got, 4 referrals today and we all said, boom, 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 boom. Those look great. Let's start working with them. Whereas, a couple months ago, we were seeing these come in and we were just scratching our heads trying to figure out how certain things were going to be managed and where did this person come from. And it just really speaks to the level of communication that's been happening between law enforcement and the lead team. Again, which I'm very grateful for. This is something that I think I'd like to highlight is, I think the important thing of this is we have areas now in our society and ways in which we've altered our thinking and we're not taking as much of an arrest and charge approach anymore. For VUXAs or drug possessions in particular, those are effectively off the table. And I would be surprised to see them come back on the table soon, but we'll see. The legislature is still talking and figuring that out. When that happens, I think we have to think about what do we do instead? Trying to think creatively about who are the partners, who's available to handle this, who's can be supportive of this. And that's what we've tried to do is lean in and be a place where people can land. I've been really happy to be that in Burien and then hearing from other communities where they don't have anything right now. And they're trying to stand that up, in real time. I want to highlight, because we were talking about kind of safety and crime prevention and crime mitigation, something that I try to make sure I don't forget when I'm talking about things that are going on with the LEAD program. And I hope this Blake thing is a representative of that, is that LEAD is at its core not a social service program. And I think you can see that by when we talk about everyone getting around the table, we're talking about prosecutors and law enforcement and case managers and, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a table full of human services background. It's not a table full of social workers. It's a partnership between a lot of people, and the agreed partnership is really one about public safety. We talk a lot in our organization about harm reduction, and in terms of how we work with an individual, that has to do with looking at the whole individual and asking yourself realistically, what can we help them with right now? We're not going to be able to deal with their addiction right away. We're not going to be able to deal with their mental health right away. We're going to continue working on them, but is there anything we can do now that can help reduce the harm they're experiencing? The other side of that is the community. Because when we talk about reducing the harm they're having, it's also trying to reduce the harm that they are bringing to the community as well, and trying to reduce that. For me, one of the greatest wins that we can see, of course, we celebrate housing every time it happens, we celebrated it today. We were really thrilled to see some people finally getting into housing. But one of the things I really like to hear from law enforcement is, yeah, they're still around there, but they're pretty quiet. They're not doing much. And I think that reduction in harm comes from the collective set of hands and eyes that are out there that are seeing them. They're saying, I see you and I'm here to help you with whatever you're working on. An officer who sees someone and says, haven't seen you in a while, looks like you're not doing that great. It sounds like maybe we need to go check in with your case manager. Can we give them a call? Case manager showing up and saying, we're seeing this impact you're having. And hey, don't forget all of these things that I had over here for you that I want to get going for you. And so maybe we can come work on that instead. I could ramble about this for a really long time, but I'll just see if there's any questions or anything else I should add.
Doesn't look like we have any questions right now. So Aaron, we'll just go ahead and move on. It's
Thank
now
you.
my honor to introduce our Burien Fire Chief, Mike Mars.
All right, thank you, everyone. Mike Mars, I'm the fire chief for North Highline Fire Department, which serves the unincorporated area of King County, North Highline, and then King 2, which is City of Burien and City of Normandy Park. The fire department doesn't have a lot to do with the crime and crime reduction, but there is one area that I was going to touch on, and that's just kind of the crime of arson. And we do see it. We've been lucky, I think, around town and around our area, but we do get what we consider just nuisance fires. But sometimes those nuisance fires do turn into structure fires. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about things like keeping available combustibles away from easy ignition. So Ted talked about kind of just reducing those crimes of opportunities. What we see sometimes in the fire department is just a crime of opportunity where someone decides, you know what, and as Ted said, the first cold night of or cold morning of the season, sometimes the first cold night, and people just want a little warming fire, or they just want a place to stay dry. And they'll do a little warming fire, and maybe it's up against a building, and they'll just get into the recyclables and they'll pull out some cardboard and they'll start a little fire. And then they fall asleep, and then it extends into a bigger fire. So certainly one of the things we always recommend is just keeping your dumpsters away from buildings. A lot of times we'll get a dumpster fire up against a building. What would be pretty easy to contain inside the dumpster, but it extends out of the dumpster unseen, because a lot of times the dumpsters are kind of tucked away back in the back where no one's watching. And you get a large dumpster on fire, extends up the wall into the attic, into a building. We've had some pretty large fires that have started as small dumpster fires, sometimes accidental warming, sometimes on purpose, where we have had people that just walk around with a shopping cart full of things and they decide to start a fire. And so the more that we can make, as Ted kind of points out, just make it harder for them to do the easy crimes. And so don't make it easy for them to start a fire. The other thing, especially now going into the hot season, is keeping the vegetation clear around your building. Same kind of thing. We get a small fire that starts as a grass fire. It's long grass, it's up against a building, it extends into the building, and all of a sudden we've got a full structure fire. I was actually listening, you'll probably hear it on the news tonight, but Renton has a 3-alarm fire going at an apartment building over there tonight, and it started as a car fire. So the car fire extended to a couple other cars, and then extended to a carport, and then extended up into it sounds like an apartment building. So they went 3 alarms, and they have quite a few people over there that are going to be displaced for a long time. So, we always say all fires start out small. It's a flick of a bic, it's a flick of a match, it's a candle, it's electrical cord that is overheated, it's a pot of oil left on your stove. It starts out small, but can become pretty large pretty quickly. So things like keeping your dumpsters away from the building, lock your recycle bins, which is kind of a pain because you have to remember to unlock them on the day they pick up. And also things like check your fire extinguisher. There again, small fires, if they're found quickly and you can put them out with a fire extinguisher, That's great. So know where your fire extinguishers are, make sure that they're up to date, that they get serviced annually, and then know how to use them. If nothing else, watch a YouTube video or two, or take a class. We do sponsor them. If you have a group, we can come out and do a fire extinguisher class, teach you how to use a fire extinguisher. And what we generally see in at least commercial structures, most fires are electrical in nature, so limit your use of extension cords and make sure that all of your electrical appliances and electrical equipment are serviced regularly. A lot of fires are just caused by lack of maintenance or deferred maintenance, so make sure you keep up on cleaning and maintaining all of your equipment. At home, it's kitchen fires. Make sure that you are careful around your kitchen when you're cooking at night, and don't forget about what you're cooking and how you're cooking it. So with that, that's about all I have, unless anyone has any questions for me.
I guess a question for Aaron Burkhalter. Just wanted to circle back. What's the recommended way for like a business owner or a manager of a local business to connect with your team? What are some of the options that they have if they see folks outside or think somebody may be a client that they could refer to your agency?
That is a great question, and you asked it just 2 days too early. So, and the way I'll explain this and with the dynamic here is that we have a new city, in the city, a outreach worker who is dedicated to responding to needs with businesses. We do have we do have a portal where people can submit referrals that I think Hugo, you've used in the past. The caution I have though is, given that we have these two places where businesses are going to be getting support for situations like this, we're going to be having a meeting on Friday to sort out where should those referrals go, like where should those be received. We don't want to give everyone like, oh, here's an option A and here's an option B, and have it kind of be like up to them to figure out which of these two options in front of me is what I'm going to need. We're hoping to make it more streamlined than that. So what I can do, if it makes the most sense, is if we do get a clear answer on that when we are meeting on later this week and we get that kind of sorted out, I can send that on to Samantha and then she can let folks know that this is where we landed on that. So I apologize that it's a little bit of a in the air question, but we did run into that unusual dynamic.
Perfect. Thank you, Aaron. We have a question in the chat in regards to any collaboration with our connected cities, such as White Center. It seems like homelessness is running across city lines. And so are there any resource sharing? Ted, do you want to take this question? Or Aaron?
Sure, I'll be glad to. I think our answer is going to be largely the same. Our lead program is definitely across city lines between White Center and Burien, and work very close together. And not just our lead program, really kind of everything we do. We're a contracted police department. So my office is directly across the hallway from the unincorporated King County Commander as well on law enforcement. And you'll find your fire department's a fire district, and the fire district is inclusive of White Center, Burien, and Normandy Park. So really, we're a bigger community on all those fronts. And that's really important because if you think about the populations that we serve in our communities, and not just that anybody serves from any one lens, but rather our whole community, we're one big community. It's not like there's some magic line at 107th and First Avenue that makes a difference. It's one community, and most people just represent that they live in the general Burien area or general North Highline area. So we like to view it like that as well, that we have to work together because most of our community moves freely across the line between White Center and Burien or Normandy Park as well.
Thank you, Chief Beau. Aaron, do you have anything to add?
Only that first off, I live in Boulevard Park, so I'm right I'm in Burien, but right between those communities, and very aware of the clients that we work with who really travel a lot between those communities. And what I'll add to that is that I'm not positive of where final decisions are, but our agency is in a lot of conversations with other South County communities. And I think it won't be very long before we're starting to see more lead work popping up in other communities near Burien.
Perfect. Thank you, Erin. We have one more question in the chat, and then I believe it was Carrie after. So the question in the chat is for Chief Beau. Would you be able to compare crime trends in Burien to trends nationally or just statewide? Are they similar to the different areas that you're seeing in your report in comparison, or do we see what do we see?
The answer is yes. So crime trends are influenced by local, start on the big scale. There certainly is some national trends that we're seeing. We're seeing some trends related to COVID response and the economy and pressures on the economy. And then we also see a lot of influence on crime trends at the state and county level based on legislation. So based on direction and decision that we make as a collective, and how we want to move forward on a myriad of topics. A lot of times crime is a symptom of a completely different topic, but we see that they're all interwoven. So, even like as we talk tonight, a lot of what we're talking tonight might be about behavioral health, but it might be manifesting as petty crime. Well, the petty crime actually is the symptom. It's not the problem. It's the place where you're having your friction because you're engaged with petty crime and having to deal with that as a business owner, as a community member. But the really underlying issue is actually a behavioral health issue. If you solve the behavioral health issue, the crime will go away. So I absolutely think that when we look at these trends, we have to look at them through all those fronts. I think what we're seeing is pretty consistent across King County cities. Auto theft is up, property crime is moderating depending on what community you're in. Domestic violence has been an issue across the state and really across the nation that's been showcased since COVID. So yeah, I definitely look at crimes on both fronts. And I also do comparison to the other South County cities, which is my own metric. And I look at the communities right around us because I think it's far more appropriate to measure Burien crime relative to Des Moines crime than it is Burien crime relative to Issaquah crime. They're completely different worlds as far as what are the drivers of those issues in their community. So I do like to look at a South Sound mapping as well, which I provide to council about once a quarter or so. And certainly I've shared it in this presentation as well, I believe in the last one, but I absolutely do look at it from that front.
Thank you, Chief Beau. Carrie, you are next.
Hi, thank you. This isn't so much a question, but rather just a comment. This is my first roundtable as a newer resident of the Southside. And I just wanted to say thank you and really appreciate all of the information and really thoughtful and insightful, and just appreciate this forum. And so I just wanted to say thanks so much.
Thank you so much. All right, Sarah.
Yeah, I also want to say thank you for organizing this, and thank you, Chief Beau, Chief Mars, and Erin for participating. I did have a question, and maybe it's too soon to answer this, but there's this new 988 phone line for mental health or behavioral health crises. Where does that go? What does it do? How does it feed into any other crisis situations? And that's not a question for a particular person. It's for anyone who wants to answer.
I punt to Erin.
Thanks. And to tell you the truth, I don't think I have clear answers on that either. It's still being stood up, and unfortunately being stood up outside of my particular view. But Sarah, I'm going to flag that as a thing for myself to get a better up to speed on for you, so that maybe next time, or if anyone runs into me again, I can let you know, because obviously that's going to be a critical resource for people. I did want to say, related to that, I was feeling bad that I left you all hanging on, if you have a referral to make. I am going to drop my email address in the chat. And if you do have anything between now and when we kind of get that question sorted out for you, you can come to me directly. I'm even going to put my cell phone number down, and do not hesitate to use that. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Erin. Chris.
My question is on the LEAD program and the law, as I understand Chief Beau shared. When the police department comes across a drug offender, they are not allowed to arrest them because that's no longer an offense. Is that correct?
Not totally. We are allowed to detain them. We are allowed to confiscate their drugs, but and certainly to run their name, document them, etc. But we're required to finish that event with a referral unless there's another extenuating factor that comes up during that contact.
Okay, that's my question really is more about the referral. Is that a mandatory referral or is that a suggested referral and they can take it or not, or they must take it and the consequences of not doing that would be what if that's the case?
Nope, it is a referral that provides them an opportunity to be engaged by resources other than law enforcement in the court system, but it is not, we can't force somebody to engage with the follow-up that would go with that referral. So if I made a referral to LEAD, for instance, they would assign a case manager and start working on that case with that individual, and they're not mandated to participate in that follow-up, but rather it's providing that opportunity as the first approach. And really, it's the services first approach at the state level, right? We're going to give services a try first, and then if that doesn't work, then we can look at other options.
Sure, that sounds great. So it's not mandatory. They have 2 of those opportunities before what happens?
So after 2, we record them in a database that we just got stood up through what's called Sector, which is a statewide program. After we've documented at least 2 referrals have occurred in law enforcement, at that point in time, on the 3rd interaction, police can do a more traditional criminal justice approach, and it's a misdemeanor offense. The state law does dictate that even at the prosecution level, that the preference for the case, that the case is resolved through either deferred prosecution or a resolution other than incarceration is captured in the law. And I don't remember the exact wording. Erin may remember it better, but basically, even if arrest occurs, the goal is still to resolve the underlying issue and not to have long-term sentencing be the resolution.
Sure, that makes sense. However, from experience, there are those that refuse help, period. What happens? Are you just arresting, citing, releasing, arresting, citing, releasing, arresting, citing, I mean, you see how this goes. If they don't want help, as much as the help could be beneficial, what happens then?
Yeah, and I'm going to hand this off to Erin, but before I do, I will say that we have to acknowledge that there's not an easy button to long-term addiction. And I like you get frustrated because I want it to be an easy button. I want to say if I do this one thing, it's going to go away. But some people's addictions are never going to go away. And that's a reality that we have to accept, is that is somewhat true. And what we do is continue to try to put options before them. So the option may be incarceration with a connection to services, but that we never go all the way away from the idea that we're trying to solve that problem. And I fully understand what you're saying, that there are people that are trapped in a cycle that may stay in that cycle forever. And I fully acknowledge that.
Well,
Go ahead, Erin. I'm sorry.
And Ted, I don't disagree with you that there are addictions that may not ever go away. However, the society at large, the greater society, if they're not going to take responsibility for their lives and make that repair, then we take responsibility and continue to support them in that addiction. If they're not going to get the help, I know your hands are tied as a police officer. You can only do what the legislature directs you to do. but it sounds to me like the problem is not in your hands, it's in the legislature's hands, and you're not given the tools to do what's necessary. I have family members that are addicts. And it took, you don't see our family anymore ever again if you don't get this help. And I had to put them away from my family because they're dangerous. We're letting these people continue to be dangerous with that kind of a solution. Some will take advantage of it. There's a fair number who won't. And I'm not hearing a solution to that problem.
Aaron,
If
can
I
hand
could
it off
jump
to you?
in, I think the first thing I want to say is I hear that question a lot, and I think it's interesting because if every time someone told us no, we walked away and just let them wallow in their addiction, we wouldn't have a program. We wouldn't be doing anything. Tons of people tell us no all the time. And that's just a reality of the fact that in terms of like when we make decisions to better our health or not, those are decisions that we all have to make, and we can't really move forward. I can't even move forward on my own health until I've convinced myself that I'm ready to do something different. And because there's no charges, there's no sentencing. With no sentencing, there does not exist really a hammer, over people's heads to push them into a particular service.
Exactly.
What I have found, though, myself, and what we've seen is that for programs where there is a hammer, we see significant behavior change while the hammer's over their head. And then once it's gone, the motivation that was keeping them going has disappeared. And so what I like about the work that we do is we're trying to work with people to get them to find that motivational internally so that they can help sustain it in the long term. So the two things are, one is people can keep saying no. If we keep getting referrals, we're going to keep checking in and seeing how they're doing. And that one moment they just give a little bit, well, okay, maybe I do. Maybe I could use a coffee today. That one little like foothold that we might be able to get a little bit further with them. We're going to seize on that. We're going to move forward. And that's what I think the work requires, is that those people we don't just walk away from them and then they're cycling in and out and in and out and in and out. We're continuing to check in with them. We're continuing to work with them so we can find them on that day when they're thinking to themselves, I really don't care to do this anymore.
Aaron, I appreciate that answer. And I don't disagree with you completely. However, there has to be a limit at some point. Otherwise, like you said, without a hammer over their head, they won't change. I could introduce you to many people who have changed because the hammer's been over their head. And it has this program, the LEAD program that you guys are doing right now, worked exactly the way it is right now here in Burien, South Seattle, somewhere else, and shown incredible success? Because I'm willing to have my mind changed. I just know what I see in my community, and I see the same people over and over and over again.
Chris, I love that question. Thank you. My email's in the chat, and if you shoot me an email, I'll send you the University of Washington study that was done on the LEAD program. And basically what they did was analyze the 12-month window after a LEAD referral versus the 12-month window after being booked into jail. And it's about a 60% reduction in engagement with law enforcement over the next 12 months. So looking at both options on the table, it actually produces better results to engage in services and engage in a case management type model than it does to book into jail. So it doesn't mean one answer is right for everybody, but certainly
Right.
The analysis on the program when it was analyzed by an independent university was that it actually is more effective than traditional criminal justice response, not less. So if you want that study, I'm glad to send it over. I'm sure Aaron would be glad as well. It's readily available online as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate your comments, and Aaron and Ted. At this time, I have a question here in the chat about this one is directed to Chief Beau about your thoughts on, I'm going to butcher this word, vigilantism, about people purchasing weapons to protect their property and families.
Well, I would say that those are two different questions. I guess one would be defining the word, but vigilante justice is never really a good idea, and obviously not something that I would ever support. As a matter of fact, oftentimes it leads to the person who reacts ending up in legal trouble equal to or greater than the problem that they're trying to resolve, just to be transparent. There's very few circumstances where the law actually supports you taking a vigilante approach to a situation. And the few circumstances that is legally allowed are often misunderstood and misapplied, which is where you end up getting into legal trouble yourself. So that's my initial response. Second response is, I think, more around the broader issue of, should you have a firearm? Should you have the ability to protect your own home? And those are personal decisions. They're not my decisions. I will say, if you choose to have a firearm, I beg of you to also invest in a safe and keep it locked up. Firearms are number one way they get into society, is being stolen from people who don't lock them up. So I just ask that you're just responsible about it, if that's something you choose to do. And again, that's a completely personal choice. I have firearms at home. I also have a big gun safe at home. So that would be my request.
Thank you, Chief Beau. The next question is for Chief Mars. Do you put a sprinkler on your rooftop to safeguard your house from fireworks on the 4th of July?
Boy, I have done that. There's no doubt. I live in Des Moines, where they've been illegal just about as long as they've been illegal in Burien, and not quite as long. This was the first year we had a total ban in the unincorporated areas also. But there's been a couple years where, coming up into the 4th of July, it has just been unseasonably warm and really dry. And I have some neighbors that don't respect the ban and don't respect the neighbors. And they're lighting off a lot of things that, go up and go boom and bang and cause problems. So I have done that. I've wet down my yard. I've wet down my my roof. So, and I don't have a shake roof, but those little bottle rockets go into all sorts of little nooks and crannies. And I've gone to a lot of roof fires on the 4th of July from Roman candles or bottle rockets or those kind of things. So, and a lot of times I'm not home on the 4th of July. So I kind of just set up sprinklers, go to work, and hope my house is still there when I come back.
Perfect. Chief Beau, I guess a follow-up question. On the 4th of July, how many firework violations were reported?
I don't know how many were reported. I know about 20 people got tickets for having fireworks. Tickets are $500 a pop. So about 20 of those tickets were distributed on the 4th of July. But I don't know how many the total number of calls were, how many were warnings. I don't have that off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you, Chief Beau. Well, I would like to just say thank you to our speakers, Chief Mars, Chief Beau, and Aaron, for coming tonight. Thank you to our media partners and our city Burien representatives that are here tonight to help support this program, delivering so many reports and programs that are helping with the issues that are impacting our communities, and working in collaborations to find solution. It's just it's how we centrally work together here at the Chamber, and we appreciate all of your engagement and support tonight. If there's anything that the Chamber can do for you, please do not hesitate to reach out. We hope that you will join us at the next Iberian District Roundtable. This happens quarterly again, and so that we can continue our discussions to help us advocate for the solutions for our community. Again, my name is Samantha Lay, and I'm the interim president and CEO here, and we are in business for your business. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.